People think the worst thing a narcissist can do is lie. They think the greatest danger is the betrayal, the cheating, the manipulation, the gaslighting. But they are wrong. The most dangerous part isn't what a narcissist does when you are weak. The true horror begins when he realizes you are becoming strong, when he notices that his words no longer pierce your heart, when your silence starts carrying more power than his accusations, when your boundaries become stronger than his demands. Because there is one dirty trick narcissists reserve for a very specific moment. Not when they control you, not when they own your attention, not when they can still pull your emotional strings. No, they use it when they feel something terrifying. They use it when they sense they are losing access to your mind, losing access to your emotions, losing access to the version of you they carefully trained to abandon yourself. And what makes this tactic so dangerous is that it doesn't look like an attack. It looks like confusion. It looks like concern. It looks like disappointment. Sometimes it even looks like love. But beneath the surface, something much darker is happening. A psychological operation designed to make you doubt your own transformation, to make you question your healing, to make you walk back into the cage after finally finding the exit. Because the narcissist knows something most people never realize. The moment you stop needing his approval, his entire empire begins to collapse. Stay with me, because what happens next changes everything. Chase Hughes discovered something unsettling about human behavior. When people lose influence over someone, they rarely reveal their panic directly. Instead, they disguise it. They hide it beneath performances, masks, carefully engineered emotional theater. Hughes understood something terrifying. Control is never truly about power. It is about dependency. The narcissist does not need your love nearly as much as he needs your attachment, your attention, your emotional investment, your willingness to keep explaining yourself. According to Jungian psychology, every person possesses a shadow, a hidden collection of rejected emotions, instincts, and truths buried beneath conscious awareness. For years, many survivors suppress their anger, suppress their boundaries, suppress their instincts, suppress their right to say no. They become agreeable, accommodating, understanding, forgiving, not because it feels good, but because survival taught them that peace was safer than authenticity. Jung called this psychological compensation. The more one side of the personality is suppressed, the more pressure builds beneath the surface, like water accumulating behind a dam, like volcanic pressure gathering in darkness. And eventually, nature demands balance. Psychic equilibrium always seeks restoration. The self cannot remain abandoned forever. For years, you may have become a sponge for pain, absorbing disappointments that were never yours, carrying emotional burdens that belonged to someone else. You became the safe place for people who never made you feel safe, the healer for those who wounded you, the listener for those who never listened, the forgiver for those who never changed. Every conflict became your responsibility. Every misunderstanding became your fault. Every emotional storm somehow ended with you apologizing. You poured yourself into a bottomless well, and no matter how much love you offered, the well never filled. No matter how much understanding you gave, the hunger never disappeared. No matter how much patience you sacrificed, the demands only grew larger. Like a traveler carrying buckets of water into a desert, you kept believing the next sacrifice would finally create peace. But peace never came, only exhaustion. The narcissist slowly taught you a devastating lesson, that your worth was tied to your usefulness, your value measured by your willingness to endure, your identity reduced to a function, a role, a resource, a source of emotional supply. And so you stayed longer than you should have, forgave more than you should have, tolerated what should never have been tolerated. You built bridges for people who only burned them, then built new bridges, then rebuilt the ashes again and again, until one day something inside you became too tired to continue pretending. Not angry, not dramatic, just exhausted beyond language, like a rubber band stretched beyond its natural limit. Not broken yet, but nearing a point of no return. This is where the narcissist becomes truly dangerous, because he notices something before you do. He notices your emotional reactions are shrinking. The arguments no longer energize you. The guilt trips no longer consume you. The chaos no longer controls your nervous system. Your silence starts feeling different. Your eyes start looking different. Your energy begins withdrawing from the game, and that terrifies him, because narcissists are often experts at detecting shifts in emotional availability. They can feel distance forming long before words are spoken, and when they sense your strength emerging, they deploy their ultimate dirty trick. They attempt to make your healing look like cruelty, your boundaries look like selfishness, your independence look like betrayal, your growth look like abandonment. Suddenly, the person who ignored your pain becomes deeply concerned about your behavior. The person who dismissed your emotions begins questioning your compassion. The person who benefited from your self-sacrifice starts accusing you of changing, and for a moment, it works. Because the strongest people often possess the deepest capacity for empathy. You start questioning yourself. Am I becoming cold? Am I overreacting? Am I being unfair? Have I changed for the worse? This is the trap. This is the illusion, the final psychological ambush. Like a magician creating smoke while stealing your attention, the narcissist redirects the spotlight away from his behavior and onto your awakening. Then it happens, the moment few people can explain, the moment survivors remember for the rest of their lives, not because it was dramatic, but because it was silent, terrifyingly silent, no screaming, no confrontation, no grand declaration. Just a single internal click, a lock turning somewhere deep inside the soul, a receiver shutting off, a bridge collapsing without a sound. Suddenly, the emotional signal disappears. The endless need to explain vanishes. The urge to convince fades. The compulsion to rescue evaporates. You look at the manipulation that once consumed your thoughts and feel nothing. Not hatred, not revenge, not rage, just clarity. Cold, clean clarity. Like fog lifting from a valley after years of darkness. For the narcissist, this moment is incomprehensible, because they believed your empathy was infinite, your tolerance eternal, your loyalty unconditional. They mistook your kindness for weakness, your patience for permission, your forgiveness for surrender. And now the system has stopped responding. The machine no longer accepts commands. The emotional leash has been severed, the gate has quietly locked, and for the first time, they are standing outside. What happens next is often misunderstood. People assume the survivor has become cold, hardened, emotionally unavailable. But Chase Hughes understood something most people miss. Suppressed traits never disappear. They return. And when they return consciously, they become strength. This is shadow integration. The moment abandoned parts of the self come home. The anger you feared becomes discernment. The boundaries you avoided become protection. The instincts you ignored become guidance. The voice you silenced becomes wisdom. You do not become less compassionate. You become impossible to exploit. You do not become detached from humanity. You become attached to reality. The part you feared becoming becomes the part that saves you, like fortress walls rising from the ruins of a city that has been invaded too many times. Like armor forged in fire after years of standing defenseless in the storm, something sacred begins emerging, not ego, not arrogance, not superiority, wholeness. For perhaps the first time in your life, you stop abandoning yourself to keep other people comfortable, and that changes everything. Because the narcissist was never competing against your weakness, he was competing against the person you were becoming, and that person has finally arrived. What happens after this transformation is one of the most fascinating psychological reversals a person can witness, because the narcissist expects resistance, he expects arguments, he expects tears, he expects explanations, he expects emotional negotiations. What he does not expect is stillness, and nothing terrifies a manipulator more than stillness. For years, he learned how to navigate your emotions. He learned which buttons triggered guilt, which words created self-doubt, which accusations forced you into defense, which silences made you chase, which disappointments made you work harder for approval. He memorized the map of your emotional landscape, but suddenly, the map no longer matches the territory. The roads have vanished. The landmarks are gone. The shortcuts no longer work. The person standing before him looks familiar, yet feels unreachable, like a radio searching desperately for a signal that no longer exists. This is when the confusion begins. Not your confusion, his. At first he tries the old methods, the guilt, the disappointment, the subtle criticism, the emotional withdrawal, The implication that you have changed, that you have become selfish, that you have become difficult, that somehow your healing has harmed him, but something unexpected happens. The hooks no longer find skin, the bait no longer finds hunger, the emotional arrows fall harmlessly to the ground, because you finally understand a truth that once felt impossible. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Not every distorted story needs your participation. And when you stop participating, the illusion begins collapsing. Like an abandoned theater after the audience has left, the lights remain, the stage remains, the actors remain, but the performance has lost its power. The desperate return of the masks. Then comes another phase, perhaps the most deceptive phase of all. Love bombing. Not because he suddenly understands your value, not because he experienced genuine transformation, but because access is being revoked, and access is everything. The compliments return, the promises return, the affection returns, the future plans return. The version of him you spent years waiting for suddenly appears, and this moment has trapped countless people because it feels like validation, it feels like hope, it feels like the answer to years of suffering. But Hughes understood something deeply unsettling about human behavior. People often reveal their true motives not when they gain power, but when they lose it. The timing exposes everything. Why now? Why after years of dismissal? Why after years of neglect? Why after years of emotional starvation? Why only when you began walking away? Because what looks like love is often panic wearing a costume, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. The illusion shatters like glass struck by sunlight. Every reflection suddenly reveals what was always there. Not devotion, dependency, not intimacy, access, not love, control. And for the first time, you stop confusing attention with care. The psychological panic. Nobody talks about, most people imagine narcissists as fearless, confident, untouchable. But beneath the surface exists a hidden terror, a terror rarely discussed, the terror of irrelevance, the terror of losing influence, the terror of no longer mattering in the psychological space they once occupied. Because manipulation requires connection, control requires engagement, influence requires emotional access, and when those doors close, a profound psychological vacuum appears. Jung described projection as the process of assigning unwanted traits onto another person. For years, the narcissist projected weakness onto you, neediness onto you, dependency onto you, instability onto you. But now something strange begins happening. The projections reverse. The emotions he once assigned to you start surfacing inside him. The insecurity, the desperation, the anxiety, the fear of abandonment, the fear of replacement, the fear of insignificance. The mirror has turned around, and for the first time, he is forced to look directly into it. This is why your detachment feels so threatening, because it forces confrontation with realities that manipulation once concealed, like floodwaters retreating and exposing everything buried beneath them. The landscape becomes impossible to ignore. The birth of psychological immunity, and while this internal collapse unfolds inside the manipulator, something extraordinary begins happening inside you. Not excitement, not triumph, not revenge, peace, a kind of peace so unfamiliar it almost feels uncomfortable at first, because chaos had become normal. Walking on eggshells had become normal. Hypervigilance had become normal. Monitoring emotional weather had become normal. You spent years scanning faces, analyzing tones, predicting reactions, preparing for emotional earthquakes before they happened. Your nervous system lived inside a state of permanent readiness, like a soldier sleeping beside an active battlefield. But now, the battlefield is gone, and silence arrives. Not the silence of loneliness, the silence of safety, the silence of finally coming home to yourself, like a house whose doors have finally been secured after years of intrusion, like a fortress standing strong after endless invasions, like a wounded animal realizing the hunt is over. The body begins relaxing, the mind begins clearing, the soul begins breathing. This is what Hughes might describe as the return of personal sovereignty, the recovery of territory once occupied by fear. The path of individuation. According to Jungian psychology, individuation is one of the highest forms of human development. It is the process of becoming fully yourself, not the version shaped by fear, not the version controlled by approval, not the version constructed to survive. The authentic self, the integrated self, the whole self. And this journey often begins with a painful realization, the realization that the person who wounded you was never the center of your story. You were. The narcissist was a chapter, not the book, a storm, not the climate, a lesson, not your identity. For years, your attention remained fixed on understanding him, decoding him, fixing him, saving him, explaining him, until one day the spotlight moves and lands somewhere unexpected, on you, on the parts of yourself that were neglected, abandoned, silenced, forgotten. And that is where real transformation begins. Because healing is not learning how to keep toxic people. Healing is learning why you believed you had to. The answers become deeper, more profound, more liberating. The chains were never merely external. Many were internal. And now those chains are falling away, one by one, like rusted links breaking under their own weight. Eventually, something emerges that many people misunderstand. Indifference. Not bitterness, not hatred, not resentment. Indifference. And there is a world of difference. Hatred keeps you connected. Resentment keeps you attached. Obsession keeps you invested. But indifference sets you free. Because true indifference is not emotional numbness. It is wisdom. It is understanding that some people are committed to remaining who they are, and that your responsibility is no longer to change them. You stop explaining, you stop defending, you stop justifying, you stop trying to prove your worth. You stop hoping that the next conversation will finally create understanding. You stop waiting for accountability. You stop waiting for closure. You stop waiting, period. And in that moment, something extraordinary happens. Your energy returns. The energy once spent managing chaos. The energy once spent surviving confusion. The energy once spent carrying emotional burdens that never belonged to you. It all comes home, like birds returning after a long winter, like rivers finding their way back to the sea, like scattered fragments of the soul finally reassembling themselves. You become unreachable, not because you built walls around your heart, but because you built wisdom around your life. The manipulator can no longer find an entrance, not because you are hiding, because there is nothing left to control. And perhaps this is the greatest irony of all. The narcissist believed your strength was the threat, but your strength was never the threat. Your awakening was, because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. Once illusion breaks, it cannot fully rebuild. Once the spell is shattered, the magic disappears forever. The person who spent years trying to convince you that you were not enough accidentally became the catalyst for discovering that you always were. The pain was real. The betrayal was real. The exhaustion was real. But so was the transformation. So was the awakening. So was the rebirth. Because the ultimate dirty trick a narcissist tries when he sees you as too strong is simple. He tries to convince you that your power is the problem, that your boundaries are cruelty, that your clarity is selfishness, that your freedom is betrayal, and the moment you stop believing that lie, his power ends, not with a battle, not with revenge, not with destruction, with awareness, with truth, with the quiet return of your own soul. The silence you hear now is not emptiness. It is the sound of manipulation losing its voice. It is the sound of illusion collapsing. It is the sound of chains hitting the floor. They were never losing you. They were losing control, and you were never being abandoned. You were finally finding yourself, because you are no longer waiting to be chosen. You have already chosen yourself, and that changes everything, forever.